We were in the middle of the Majin Buu saga, shortly after Goku had to return to the other world because his time on Earth had run out. He entrusted the potential of Goten and Trunks to defeat Majin Buu, with Piccolo guiding them to continue teaching the fusion technique. The difference in this story is that, after a couple more hours of practicing the fusion, Piccolo would become frustrated and completely lose his patience upon seeing that the boys were making no progress and still couldn't even execute the fusion dance correctly. I've had enough of you two. It seems like you don't want to avenge the deaths of Gohan and Vegeta. That's it. We don't have much time for you two to properly fuse and fight Majin Buu. I have something in mind that will be much more effective for you. Goten and Trunks would feel intimidated by the Namakayan's harsh words, wondering what this new training method he had in mind could be. Shortly after, they would discover that this method was going to be the hyperbolic time chamber. Even though it was somewhat irresponsible, Piccolo simply couldn't tolerate the immaturity of those boys any longer. You two will train in the chamber for an entire day. Learn fusion on your own, and I'll check your progress in a year. With no further discussion, the boys were forced into the hyperbolic time chamber by Piccolo. Inside the chamber, the environment was extremely harsh and difficult to endure for their small bodies and the limited power they had. However, they knew they couldn't disappoint Mr. Piccolo or their families.
I have an idea, Goten. In case we don't manage to master fusion, we need to be ready to impress the adults with an alternative. That's why we need to train our bodies individually as much as possible without relying on the power that fusion might give us. You're right, Trunks. I remember my brother telling me how hard it was for him to train in this room. And yet, in just 1 year, he went from being weaker than us and unable to even transform into a Super Saiyan to completely mastering the transformation, even reaching Super Saiyan 2. Exactly, Goten. Just think about it. You and I have the same potential as your older brother. If he could do it when he was much weaker than us, then there's no reason we can't at least match him, if not surpass him.
And so the boys, while continuing to practice fusion, did not make it their primary focus during training. Instead, they concentrated on strengthening their individual bodies, training with the same ferocity and intensity as their fathers, trying to replicate the harshness of their parents' training. This approach proved highly effective due to their hybrid potential, and the results came quickly. In just 6 months of training, Goten and Trunks had achieved Super Saiyan 2, reaching the same level of power Gohan had during the Cell saga. As a result, they had already surpassed the Gohan of the Buu saga, who had become slightly weaker compared to 7 years prior. As they neared a full year of training in the chamber, the power of the two hybrids had increased immensely. By then, both boys had surpassed their fathers in the same form and had fully mastered Super Saiyan 2 at maximum efficiency. This colossal power gave the boys a tremendous boost in ego and arrogance, a characteristic often tied to the power of Super Saiyan 2 when obtained at a young age, just as Gohan experienced during the Cell saga. Because of this arrogance, during one of their intense training battles, they unknowingly damaged part of the entrance to the hyperbolic time chamber. They only realized the extent of the damage when it was already too late.
Oh no, Goten, please don't tell me. Don't tell me we've destroyed the entrance. Oh God. Try opening the door, Trunks, please,
responded a terrified Goten. Trunks slowly and with great fear approached the exit door. With extreme caution, he opened it, and to the boy's greatest horror, the door no longer led to the outside world. Instead, it opened into the void that lay beyond the palace, which connected that dimension to the real world. From that moment on, the boys entered a state of extreme panic. Goten was the most affected, blaming himself for partially destroying the entrance and believing it was his fault they were now trapped. Trunks, however, tried to remain strong for both of them, attempting to comfort Goten by assuring him that eventually Piccolo and the others would find a way to get them out. In the meantime, he said, the best thing they could do was to keep training as much as possible, so they would be ready when they were rescued. Goten, though still frightened, listened to his friend's advice. While the boys resigned themselves to continuing their training inside the chamber, Piccolo, surprised that the boys had stayed inside for so long, decided to go check on their progress over the past year. However, to his utmost horror, he discovered that the entrance had completely destroyed, leaving the boys trapped inside.
Damn it! Those idiots must have been so careless that they destroyed the entrance,
said the Namakain in a tone of pure panic. His concern deepened as he realized he would have to confront the boys' mothers about the situation. Meanwhile, the boys, resigned to their fate, continued training. By that time, they had already completely mastered the fusion technique, but they kept growing individually. Ironically, they were unaware that they already had enough power to escape the hyperbolic time chamber if they screamed with all their strength while fused. This fusion, as in the original story, would push their potential to new heights, allowing them to reach Super Saiyan 3, the same form Goku had shown them before returning to the other world. However, the two boys were determined to train as hard as possible to achieve that transformation individually. After nearly a second day in the chamber, during which Dendi and Piccolo were still unable to reconnect the hyperbolic time chamber with Kami's lookout, everyone was forced to stop what they were doing as they felt Majin Buu's ki change drastically. Majin Buu had transformed into a worse version of himself, more evil, more dangerous, and more intelligent. He had become Super Buu. This new version of the Majin demon did not wait for the 3 days that Goku had set for their next battle. Instead, Super Buu immediately headed toward Kami's lookout. Upon arriving at the lookout, everyone was terrified and helpless in the face of such a monstrous power as Super Buu. The events of the waiting period unfolded more or less as in the original story, with Piccolo doing everything possible to buy time, distracting Super Buu in every imaginable way while silently praying that Dendi could finally reopen the hyperbolic time chamber. Eventually, Super Buu could no longer bear to wait. Not even the hourglass Piccolo had given him as an example of how much longer he needed to wait could pacify him, and even Videl's presence at the lookout failed to calm the demon. Resigned, Piccolo tried one last tactic to gain more time, leading Super Buu on a long walk through the entire interior of the lookout. At that moment, Piccolo came up with the idea to contact the boys telepathically. The two, surprised but relieved, were finally able to hear Mr. Piccolo's voice.
I'm sorry, boys, for not contacting you earlier. I was so stressed and scared that we had lost you that I forgot I could do this. I forget to tell you that we've lost. Majin Buu has arrived at the lookout, and he's determined to fight you or kill us all.
Piccolo's voice carried a melancholic tone, which deeply unsettled the boys.
It can't be! Mr. Piccolo, we're so sorry. We wish we could get out of here.
I know, boys. I know whatever happened in there wasn't intentional. And I'm sorry that you're going to face such a slow and horrible death. Alone, with hunger and thirst. I'm so sorry, but this is the end. Majin Buu is going to kill us all. I'm ashamed of myself for not being up to the task. I've failed you. I'm so sorry, boys.
Overwhelmed by the shame of his failure, Piccolo cut off the telepathic connection with the boys, convinced that his and everyone else's end was near. Super Buu had completely lost his patience and realized that Piccolo had led him in circles around the lookout for half an hour. Enraged, Super Buu was now about to kill everyone by turning them into sweets, except for Chi-Chi, whom he had already turned into an egg and killed after she dared to confront him.
Damn it, Goten. We have to get out of here now. I know, Trunks, but I don't know how to do it, damn it.
Damn it. We have to do something.
Anything, damn it.
The boys, desperate and briefly losing control of themselves as the Saiyan rage coursed through their veins and flooded their minds, began screaming into the void in frustration. In their desperation, both transformed into Super Saiyan 3, their cries filled with anguish and fury as they struggled to cope with the pain of knowing they had lost. But eventually, from that desperation came the solution to their problems.
Their combined scream tore open a dimensional rift between the hyperbolic time chamber and the outside world. When they realized what had happened, they immediately exited the chamber. At last, after 2 years trapped inside, they returned to the outside world. However, they were extremely exhausted from the sheer energy they had expended in their scream. The exhaustion quickly turned into something else entirely when they saw Super Bew, his face covered in chocolate. He had devoured all their friends and family and wasted no time mocking the boys about it.
Bew ate all your loved ones. They were delicious, except the arrogant woman, the loud woman. We turned her into an egg and crushed her like nothing. It was so funny,
the demon said, his face filled with pure satisfaction and sadism. Goten, realizing that the crushed egg was all that remained of his mother, and Trunks, understanding that part of the chocolate Super Bew had eaten was his mother, were both consumed with a level of fury they had never felt before. Their hybrid Saiyan powers surged dramatically, pushing them far beyond their previous limits. Now, individually, they were as strong as GOTENs had been in the original story. For the first time, Super Bew began to feel a flicker of concern.
You'll see, you damn monster! We'll make you pay! You have no idea what's coming!
The boys stood ready, and in perfect synchronization, performed the fusion dance. At last, they revealed the mighty GOTENs, who immediately transformed into Super Saiyan 3. The power he unleashed was monstrous and absurd, surpassing anything seen up to that point. It was a power so immense it could be felt from the Supreme Kai's planet. Goku and Gohan, sensing the incredible ki, were curious about its source. They couldn't believe it was the fused ki of the boys. GOTENs was serious. There was no room for games this time. Without any further words, he launched himself as Super Bew, ready to obliterate him completely from the face of the earth. He sought to avenge his friends and family, and ensure that the 2 years trapped in the hyperbolic time chamber hadn't been wasted. As Super Saiyan 3, GOTENs exuded immeasurable and crushing power that terrified Super Bew. The majin quickly grew nervous and attempted to attack the young fused warrior, but GOTENs effortlessly stopped every one of Bew's attacks. Even part of Bew's body that tried to absorb him were disintegrated by GOTEN's sheer aura. GOTEN's power was unparalleled, far beyond anything in the Majin Buu saga, exceeding even the hypothetical Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. Perhaps it even surprised Goku's Super Saiyan God form from the Battle of Gods storyline in the original series. After 2 years trapped in the hyperbolic time chamber, the boys' arrogance and overconfidence had matured significantly. They no longer treated Majin Buu as a joke, even though they now surpassed him by an astronomical margin in power. Fully aware of the limited duration of their fusion in that form, they wasted no time. Without hesitation, they launched Super Bew into the air with a devastating ki blast that made the entire Earth tremble, along with the multiple galaxies shaken by the fusion's sheer rage. They completely disintegrated Super Bew. This time, there was no chance for him to regenerate. He was utterly and irreversibly destroyed. The moment the attack ended, the fusion wore off. However, the boys did not feel happy or proud of their victory. It left a bitter taste, and they were uncertain about what to do next. To their surprise, Dende arrived at Kami's lookout. He had sensed that the danger had finally passed. To the boys' astonishment, Dende had survived Majin Buu's wrath. He had been saved from such a fate thanks to Mr. Popo, who had thrown him out the lookout toward Earth. With his meager and insignificant power level, Super Bew hadn't even noticed him. Thus, not all hope was lost. However, due to the wish Bulma had made a few days earlier in the story, the Dragon Balls would take a few months to reactivate. During those months, they would have to live on a desolate Earth without any humans, with only Dende as their companion. A truly depressing prospect. But then, to the astonishment of all three, Gohan arrived. He too was alive. His ritual had been completed, making him more powerful than ever.
Though he was frustrated and furious for arriving too late, everyone was already gone, a true tragedy. When Gohan explained to everyone what had happened and where he had been, the Supreme Kai and Kibito appeared as well. They had finally realized that Majin Buu had been defeated, not by Gohan, but by the two boys using fusion. Even individually, Goten and Trunks were now incredibly powerful, worthy rivals for Gohan in his unlocked potential state, a truly astonishing revelation. Before leaving the Supreme Kai's planet, Goku had informed them about what could be done to fix everything now that Majin Buu had been defeated. Acting on this, the Supreme Kai and Kibito transported everyone to New Namek. Thanks to the Namakayan Dragon Balls, all the collateral damage on Earth was restored, and all the good people who had died since the day Babidi and Dabura arrived on Earth were brought back to life. Surprisingly, Vegeta was included in the wish as one of the good people, despite his actions while allowing himself to be possessed by Babidi. This frustrated Vegeta as he found himself resurrected with his body restored. A part of him had wanted to remain in the other world, where he could reunite with Kakarot and train with him for all eternity, but it seemed that reunion would have to wait. However, King Kai, who served as a bridge for everyone to communicate with each other, desperately begged them to wait before abandoning the idea. Now that Earth had been restored and all those who had died since the day Babidi and Dabura arrived were revived, there was still one final wish that could be made to Porunga, a wish to finally bring Goku back to life. Goku was uncertain if he wanted to return, but considering that the appearance of Majin Buu had disproved his theory that he attracted evil, he began to reconsider. He had truly enjoyed seeing all his friends again, spending time with his son Goten, and even spending an entire day with Gohan, just like in the old days. Driven by nostalgia and the desire to finish his unfinished battle with Vegeta, he ultimately agreed to be revived. With that, everyone was finally able to reunite on Earth and return to living in peace as they had before. Even though the consequences of the Buu saga had been reversed, there were still two unresolved matters remaining. To begin with, there was the sorrow and sadness felt by Mr. Satan over the loss of his friend Buu. He pleaded with Earth's warriors to revive the good side of Majin Buu. Trusting Mr. Satan's judgment, Goku eventually agreed, on the condition that when Earth's Dragon Balls become active again, they would revive the good Buu and erase all memories of Majin Buu from everyone's minds to ensure he wouldn't face any problems. The second issue, however, was the deep trauma that Goten and Trunks had suffered after being trapped in the hyperbolic time chamber for 2 years. While it wasn't as terrible as being trapped there for several decades or their entire lives, for children their age, who had only known a life of perpetual peace from their perspective, it was a significant ordeal to endure. This trauma was something their parents, along with Piccolo, would have to help them overcome. Their mothers, Bulma and Chi-Chi, were especially furious and resentful. They blamed Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo for putting Goten and Trunks in such a vulnerable position, and for placing the burden of defeating Majin Buu on their shoulders. Chi-Chi in particular reproached Goku for not finishing off Majin Buu when he had the chance, for initially refusing to be revived, and for allowing events to unfold as they did. She even concluded in her frustration that Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo had ruined Goten and Trunks' childhoods. While this was an exaggeration driven by her hysteria at the time, her anger was understandable. Despite the trauma they endured, Goten and Trunks showed little physical change after spending 2 years in the hyperbolic time chamber, owing to their growth patterns being similar to that of pure Saiyans. In any case, the damage was already done. Despite the suffering the boys had endured through that experience, now that everything had finally returned to normal, they were gradually adjusting to this new reality. Moreover, it would have been unthinkable to abandon everything now, considering the immense power they had achieved. Unlike Gohan, Goten, and Trunks had always been more inclined to enjoy fighting and continue training to grow stronger. However, the circumstances of the original story had left them forgotten and pushed into the background. Here, things would be completely different. Goten and Trunks were simply too powerful to be forgotten. In fact, they were far more powerful than their fathers, even individually. And as for their fusion, it was on a completely different level. Not even Goku, Vegeta, and Gohan combined could stand a chance against that mighty fusion. This entire situation gradually led the boys' mothers to accept that it was highly likely the children would follow the same paths as their fathers. This was even more apparent now, given the vast experience they had gained after being trapped in the hyperbolic time chamber for 2 years. And so, life continued from that point forward, with Goku and Vegeta training more than ever before, alongside their sons. The two fathers became much more involved in their children's lives, bonding over their shared passion for training and fighting. Ironically, they became better fathers than they ever were in the original story. This newfound involvement also brought a tremendous motivation for Goku and Vegeta to keep training and growing stronger. They found it unacceptable that they were now much weaker than the boys. After all, they felt they needed to continue earning their children's respect. As a result, by the time the events of the Battle of Gods began, Goku and Vegeta were significantly more powerful than in the original story. Vegeta in particular had also achieved Super Saiyan 3, inspired by the ingenuity of the boys in using that form despite its drawbacks. Eventually, he managed to overcome the immense energy drain of the transformation, making it as viable and useful in prolonged battles as the earlier Super Saiyan forms. Goten and Trunks had also become individually much stronger, avoiding frequent use of fusion and reliance on the technique to showcase their power. They found it far more satisfying to fuse only occasionally, using the opportunity to gauge the tremendous growth they had achieved individually. The hybrids had now surpassed even Ultimate Gohan, who recognized that his prophecy had come true. The boys had indeed surpassed him due to his lack of dedication and seriousness in training. This realization was becoming even more evident with the increasing responsibilities he faced after graduating and marrying Videl. In this version of events, due to the closer relationships the fathers had with their children, Goku did not forget to attend Bulma's birthday party, and Vegeta didn't arrive late either. As a result, when Beerus awakened, eager to find a worthy rival like the one in his dreams, he and Whis headed directly to Earth, where Bulma had organized her birthday party aboard a luxurious cruise ship she had purchased for the occasion. This led to a more straightforward and expedited introduction. Beerus wasted no time and immediately inquired about the Super Saiyan God, something no one had any knowledge of. Despite this, Beerus was quickly distracted by the opportunity to enjoy culinary delights unlike anything he had tasted in his long life. However, Majin Buu ruined Beerus's good mood by eating all the pudding that remained, refusing to let Beerus try even a single one. This infuriated Beerus, and no amount of ridiculous dancing from Vegeta could calm the tantrum he was about to unleash. With no other option, everyone, especially Goku and Vegeta, desperately attacked Beerus to stop him. Unsurprisingly, their efforts were futile. Shockingly for everyone, especially Beerus, within just a few seconds, only 2 warriors remained standing to confront him, Goten and Trunks. Confused, Beerus asked if Goku and Vegeta had not yet shown their full power. The pure Saiyans responded that they had indeed given it their all and that, in truth, their sons were far stronger than them by a wide margin. This revelation left Beerus stunned and deeply intrigued. Although the boys did not possess Divine Ki, when they transformed into Super Saiyan 3, their individual power reached a level comparable to Goku's Super Saiyan God form from the original story. This incredible display captured Beerus' attention, gradually calming his anger over the pudding and allowing him to relish the thrilling battle he was experiencing. However, even with all that power, it wasn't enough to fully satisfy the Destroyer's curiosity about how far the boys could go.
Beerus demanded that they show him more, much more power. Dende then healed the boys, restoring all their energy. With their strength renewed, they performed the fusion dance, transforming into the powerful and intimidating GOTENs despite their young age and small stature. Once again, Beerus was astonished. Although the battle against this fusion was much shorter due to its time limitation, it didn't diminish the fact that these boys were undeniably worthy rivals for the God of Destruction. More than being impressed by the power they displayed while fused in Super Saiyan 3, Beerus was thrilled by the evident potential they represented. If, at such a young age, these two were already so powerful, he could only tremble with excitement at the thought of how far they might go as adults, as old as their fathers. Perhaps they might even reach or surpass his own level. However, for that to happen, they would first need proper divine training. After all, if they could reach such extraordinary levels of power with only mortal ki, the possibilities were unimaginable if they learned to harness divine ki, or better yet, discovered how to become a Super Saiyan God. Thus, after the battles and meals, Beerus proposed that the boys come to his planet to train with him. The boys, however, agreed only on the condition that their fathers could join them in the training. Beerus, with little choice, agreed to the whims of the boys despite the disapproval of their mothers. Bulma and Chi-Chi had to begin accepting the reality that Goten and Trunks were growing up. While they might not have been growing physically as quickly, they were certainly maturing mentally. It was clear they were gradually becoming more independent and less reliant on their parents. With that, after Bulma's birthday party, the hybrids, along with their fathers, departed with Beerus to his planet and toward new adventures yet to come. Once parents and children arrived on Beerus' planet, their long stays there began as they trained under Whis' tutelage. The training was rigid and rigorous. Although the boys were technically stronger than their fathers, their still developing bodies gave them a significant disadvantage in enduring prolonged training sessions. It was reminiscent of the issue Goku faced in Dragon Ball GT, where his small body struggled to handle his massive power. Eventually, all those disadvantages would be corrected thanks to the immense vitality and endurance granted by Divine Ki. This advantage grew even more evident one day when Goten, seemingly out of nowhere, transformed into a Super Saiyan God. His power far surpassed everyone else's, leaving Trunks disappointed that he hadn't been the first to achieve the form. Meanwhile, Goku was ecstatic and filled with pride. He couldn't believe how powerful and talented his son was. It was surreal to think that, at Goten's age, Goku himself couldn't have even dreamed of wielding such power. Beerus awoke from his nap, startled by the sheer pressure of divine power radiating from Goten's body. Quickly dressing, he demanded a fight with Goten. Goten, confident in his newfound abilities, agreed. The resulting battle showcased an unparalleled power. While Beerus was still far superior to Goten, his groggy state from just waking up left his reflexes less than ideal for combat. Imagine fighting at such a high level immediately after waking up. It would be like fighting while drunk. Fortunately, Beerus was more than strong enough to handle Goten, but even so, Goten's power was astounding. His strength likely rivaled or even surpassed that of Goku and Vegeta in their Super Saiyan Blue forms from the Champa saga, rather than being comparable to the initial Super Saiyan God transformation. Shortly after, Trunks also achieved the Super Saiyan God form, followed by Goku and Vegeta, who unlocked it almost simultaneously due to how evenly matched they were as rivals. Although all of them unlocked the form later than in the original story, their raw power was far beyond where it should have been at this point. They still had several months of training ahead, specifically 4 months. 4 months because Frieza had finally been resurrected by his loyal soldiers, Sorbet and Tagoma. Frieza decided to train for 4 months to level the playing field. He was also somewhat curious about the boys Sorbet mentioned, children who had defeated Majin Buu. However, Frieza wasn't too concerned. He assumed that if those boys were able to defeat Majin Buu, then Goku and Vegeta must be even stronger. Confident in his training, Frieza believed he would easily surpass them without issue, a grave miscalculation by the Emperor. The next few months passed, and driven by the motivation of having so many powerful training partners, both the children and the adults managed to achieve Super Saiyan Blue. However, it was still in its imperfect form, a highly unstable and exhausting transformation. They didn't have much time to practice mastering it, but that didn't matter. Their raw power was already so far beyond what it should have been at this point in the story that Super Saiyan God would be more than enough for what was coming next. Frieza's return to Earth, ready to exact his revenge after 4 months of intense training. While it might sound laughable to other warriors present, for Frieza, those 4 months were truly exceptional, given that he had never trained a single day in his life before. The initial events of Frieza's return and invasion unfolded similarly to the original story, with Gohan unable to contribute much to the fight due to all the power he had lost from not training for so long. Eventually, however, Goku, Vegeta, Goten, and Trunks learned about what was happening on Earth through Whis' staff. Without delay, Goku teleported everyone back to Earth. Frieza was thrilled to finally see Goku and Vegeta again, though he was surprised to see the children with them. He didn't expect much from them, especially after seeing that Gohan couldn't put up a fight. However, this would prove to be a grave miscalculation on his part. While both Goku and Vegeta were eager to battle Frieza themselves, they wanted to test their son's abilities first. They decided to let their children take the fight, but they took the challenge up a notch, playing rock, paper, scissors to determine who would face the Emperor. Trunks emerged as the winner. When Trunks stepped forward to face Frieza, ready to take him on, Frieza was hit with a vivid flashback of the trauma he suffered the first time he died. He remembered how future Trunks had cut him into pieces before disintegrating him as if he were nothing more than a joke. He, the great Emperor Frieza, shaken but determined, Frieza took the fight against this boy, who looked so much like that lilac-haired warrior, very seriously. He immediately transformed into his final form, wasting no time before revealing his new evolution. Frieza's transformation into Golden Frieza stunned everyone present, showcasing the immense power he had achieved in such a short time. While the sheer display of power intimidated Trunks slightly, the young Saiyan determined to impress both Goten and Vegeta, maintaining an unwavering expression. He confidently assured Frieza that, golden or not, he was going to defeat him. To back up his words, Trunks transformed into Super Saiyan God, a form that once again astonished everyone present. Gohan in particular was left speechless upon realizing that not only Goten, but also Goku and Vegeta had achieved this transformation. It was in that moment he fully understood the magnitude of his mistake in neglecting his training. Trunks began to his battle with Frieza. While Golden Frieza's strikes were immensely powerful and painful to endure, Trunks gradually overcame his initial lack of confidence. As the fight progressed, he noticed something peculiar at times. Frieza would clumsily evade or avoid his attacks, his movements betraying a clear fear in his eyes. Unbeknownst to Trunks, Frieza was deeply intimidated by the boy's mere presence and appearance. Memories of his death at the hands of future Trunks haunted him, and now, facing a younger version of someone so similar, his fear lingered just beneath the surface, undermining his confidence. Not understanding why his face seemed to terrify Frieza so much, Trunks took full advantage of the psychological edge he had over the Emperor. He began to devise more efficient ways to counter Frieza's attacks and inflict significant damage, all while feeding the fear Frieza appeared to harbor toward him. Although Trunks was still in the dark about what was happening, everyone else, especially Goku and Vegeta, understood it perfectly. Vegeta smirked and even laughed at the pitiful sight of Frieza, still haunted by the memory of future Trunks, and how he had been cut down so many years ago. Eventually, alongside the psychological advantage Trunks had over Frieza, the enormous energy drain caused by the golden form began to take its toll. Frieza had failed to properly acclimate to his new transformation before coming to Earth, started to falter. As this became more evident, Trunks completely dominated the fight, turning it into a one-sided beatdown. Trunks thoroughly enjoyed pummeling the villain who had once terrified his parents before he was even born, but he also knew it was time to finish things once and for all. Unlike the arrogance that often defined Saiyan warriors, Trunks had learned from his and Goten's experience with Majin Buu when hesitation or overconfidence could cost dearly. Understanding the importance of ending the fight when necessary, Trunks prepared to deliver the final blow. Trunks briefly transformed into Super Saiyan Blue, gathering as much raw power as he could to unleash a devastating final flash at Frieza. The Emperor was unable to do anything to stop the attack. As he struggled against the immense energy, Frieza eventually lost his golden form. At that moment, he found himself completely overwhelmed, unable to believe that he had lost once again to that lilac-haired boy. It finally became clear to Frieza. There was no doubt in his mind now. That man with the sword and this child were the same person, even if he couldn't explain how. With that final thought, which cemented the terror he felt towards Trunks, the Emperor met his end once more, completely disintegrated by the attack. He was sent back to his personal hell he so despised. Trunks stood victorious and elated in front of his friends. Though he was secretly in pain from a couple of broken ribs and exhausted from using so much power to finish off Frieza, he had done it. He, a mere child, had defeated the mighty Frieza. Vegeta couldn't have been prouder of his son, especially since Trunks had used his father's signature attack to defeat Frieza. In a way, Trunks had honored his father by avenging him for all the years of servitude and humiliation Frieza had forced Vegeta to endure in his youth. And so, after the battle, Trunks was healed from his grueling fight. Eventually everyone returned to Capsule Corporation to celebrate such a monumental victory, with Trunks as the star of the party dedicated to him. His parents were closer than ever, expressing their pride in their son, a display that, truth be told, made Goten a little jealous. Noticing this, Goku stepped in to encourage his son, telling him that he knew without a doubt that Goten would have done just as well against Frieza. He reassured Goten that he, too, couldn't be prouder of him. The young hybrid, comforted by his father's words, felt much better. With the celebration and the banquet in full swing, everyone enjoyed their well-deserved peace, at least for now. After this,
Goten and Trunks, increasingly asserting themselves as young warriors dedicated to combat and training like their fathers, found their perspectives of life forever changed after being trapped in the hyperbolic time chamber for over 2 days. This change, much to the frustration of Bulma and especially Chi-Chi, was deeply unsettling for their mothers. Despite this, Goten and Trunks continued striving to please their mothers, even if only a little. After the events of Frieza's resurrection, they decided to remain on Earth. However, that didn't stop them from training together and encouraging Gohan to continue his own training. Goten, with the support of his mentor Piccolo, pressured Gohan not to abandon his strength and to keep growing stronger just in case. Eventually, Goku and Vegeta returned to Earth after several months, explaining to everyone what had transpired on Beerus' planet and how they met his twin brother, Champa, the god of destruction, of Universe 6. Goten and Trunks were disappointed to have missed this encounter. Regardless, 5 warriors were needed to participate in the tournament, which was perfect since they already had enough participants. The team consisted of Goku and Vegeta, obviously followed by Goten and Trunks, with Monaka as the 5th member at Beerus' request. While Bulma investigated the Super Dragon Balls with Jaco and constructed a super radar capable of locating the massive planetary Dragon Balls, Goku and Vegeta decided to make the most of the 3 free days they had to train in the hyperbolic time chamber. They tried to discuss this discreetly so Goten and Trunks wouldn't overhear, fearing it might reignite the trauma of being trapped there. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. Goten and Trunks overheard Goku mention the idea, and to everyone's surprise, they had no issue with going back into the time chamber. Initially nervous, they felt reassured knowing that Dende had made improvements to the chamber to prevent anyone from being trapped again. Furthermore, with their fathers accompanying them, they no longer feared the experience. On the contrary, they were excited. Naturally, Bulma and Chi-Chi were horrified by the idea and vehemently opposed it. However, Goten and Trunks, having matured greatly as warriors, asserted that this was what they truly wanted. They refused to lag behind their fathers after everything they had sacrificed during their time in the chamber to attain their current powers. They were determined not to squander their potential like Gohan. After all, their time trapped in the chamber had already altered and taken away their childhoods. By this point, they were on the verge of transitioning from their childlike appearances into adolescence. Spending 3 more years inside wouldn't make much difference to their futures. They were resolute in their path as warriors and even envisioned opening a martial arts dojo when they grew older, much like the lore described in Dragon Ball Online. Impressed and proud of their son's determination, Goku and Vegeta agreed to train with them. Together they aimed to perfect their powers and enhance their mastery of Super Saiyan Blue. Thus, fathers and sons entered the time chamber for 3 years. The veteran Saiyans used their experience to help their sons refine their powers and abilities, while the hybrid Saiyans pushed their fathers to surpass their limits due to their extraordinary growth rates. Their hybrid potential, which was only beginning to be fully realized as their bodies matured, allowed Goten and Trunks to finally achieve appearances closer to the young adults, seen in Dragon Ball Super Hero. Their powers grew exponentially, surpassing their fathers, though the power gap wasn't yet massive. Even so, it was a source of pride for everyone. Occasionally, Goten and Trunks fused into Gotenks to train against Goku and Vegeta. In this form, their power was overwhelmingly superior, forcing Goku and Vegeta to push their limits further. Goku perfected a Super Saiyan Blue form and combined it with Kaioken, while Vegeta ascended to Super Saiyan Blue evolution. Goku later reached this form out of necessity to keep up with Gotenks' perfected Super Saiyan Blue form. After 3 years of training, the power emanating from the Saiyans, both purebloods and hybrids, was staggering. However, their hygiene was abysmal, and the sight of their own grown sons was devastating for Chi-Chi and Bulma, who comically broke into tears. Goten and Trunks laughed nervously, trying to comfort their mothers, assuring them that nothing had changed. They were still the same people, but were relieved to finally appear closer to their actual age. After cleaning up properly, the 4 Saiyans were ready to head to the nameless planet and participate in the tournament. Following initial introductions and aptitude tests, the tournament began much like in the original story. Goku was the first to fight, defeating Botamo as before and losing to Frost due to his poison needle. After Jacko exposed Frost's cheating, Vegeta stepped in, obliterating Frost with a single powerful punch. His battle against Magetta proceeded similarly to the original storyline. The fight with Kaba also unfolded as before, with Kaba learning to transform into a Super Saiyan. Meanwhile, Goten and Trunks grew increasingly frustrated, realizing they might not get a chance to fight. However, Hit, aware of Vegeta's overwhelming strength after training with Goten and Goku, chose not to hold back. Desperate, Hit used his time skip ability against Vegeta, who couldn't initially comprehend the technique. Vegeta ironically assumed Hit was simply incredibly fast. Jacko, however, noticed the time manipulation and informed the others. After a very difficult battle in which Vegeta endured Hit's brutal strikes to his vital points, severely weakening him, he eventually fell, defeated, and on the brink of death. Whis had to heal him immediately to prevent him from dying due to the meticulous pressure point attacks Hit had used to kill him. Even though Hit emerged the winner, he was clearly exhausted from using all his techniques, his energy drained. He wasn't at 100% for his next match against Goku. Thanks to all of that, and the fact that Goku himself was already much stronger than in the original story, plus Hit being worn out and Goku having understood the assassin's time skip technique, it was no problem at all for the Saiyan to gain the upper hand, under such favorable circumstances. He defeated Hit without much trouble in an ordinary Super Saiyan Blue form, not needing to use Kaioken or Blue Evolution. However, Goku wasn't fully satisfied, knowing Hit hadn't been at his maximum due to having fought Vegeta first. He hoped they could face each other in the future. Thus, Universe 7 needed only 2 fighters to win the tournament. Champa was left stunned by the power of the Universe 7 warriors. Eventually, Grand Zeno appeared and all the gods bowed down to him in terror, while Goku retained his usual casual attitude. This time, Goten and Trunks also interacted with Zeno, and the Omni King greatly enjoyed the trio's cheerful personalities. He was satisfied with the tournament and considered organizing another involving multiple universes in the future. Zeno gave Goku, Goten, and Trunks each a button they could use to call him or visit him whenever they liked. Beerus and Champa trembled at the thought of the risks involved in leaving such power in the hands of someone as irresponsible as Goku and, in their view, those two children. After that, a bitter Champa left for his universe. Meanwhile, Universe 7 discovered, thanks to Monaka's indications, that the nameless planet was actually the missing Super Dragon Ball. They were thus able to finally summon Super Shenron or Zalama. Beerus, in a rare gesture of generosity, wished for the Earth of Universe 6 to be restored so that his brother Champa could also enjoy Earth's cuisine whenever he wanted. Soon afterwards, everyone returned happily to Earth to celebrate their victories, though Goten and Trunks felt a deep sense of bitterness and frustration at not having participated in the fights. They would soon get their chance to show just how powerful they truly were with what was about to unfold in the near future. Following the events of the tournament between Universes 6 and 7, Goku, Vegeta, Goten, and Trunks spent some relaxed time on Earth with their families. Chi-Chi and Bulma still lamented how abruptly the boys had grown due to using the hyperbolic time chamber, though by now it had become more of a minor and comedic topic for everyone else, especially after seeing that Goten and Trunks' mental health was perfectly fine, despite once having been trapped in the chamber. Beerus and Whis were also around officially to relax and enjoy Earth's food as usual, but secretly Beerus was keeping a close eye on the kids' progress. Now they were stronger than their fathers, despite not having Super Saiyan Blue evolution like Goku and Vegeta. Their powers were simply absurd, increasingly piquing the Destroyer's curiosity. He was beginning to suspect that his true rival might actually be hiding among these two children rather than Goku or Vegeta. These musings were cut short when, out of nowhere, a strange ship appeared in Capsule Corporation's garden. Inside was an unconscious, gravely wounded figure, none other than future Trunks. Goku quickly fetched a senzu bean to heal him. At that point, everyone explained to present Trunks who this future version was and recapped the story since, just like in Dragon Ball Super, no one had ever told him until now. When future Trunks awoke from his coma, he instinctively attacked Goku, burning with rage and a desire for vengeance for reasons unknown. It took a smack from his mother from the past to make him come to his senses. At last he understood that this Goku was the real Goku, although he still had many questions, like how Goku could be alive again after what happened in the Cell Saga. In any case, future Trunks reintroduced himself to everyone, even his younger present self. He was thrilled to see how grown-up present Trunks was, although it seemed odd. He didn't recall being that tall at this point in the timeline. Present Trunks and his friend Goten told him it was a very long story. Future Trunks then explained everything that had happened in his timeline and why he had returned, not because of Majin Buu, but due to a new and terrifyingly powerful enemy who destroyed his future and practically wiped out humanity, causing even more deaths than the androids. This enemy was an exact copy of Goku. Future Bulma had named him Goku Black. Everyone was horrified by what future Trunks described, Goku Black's atrocities and what he had done to their world. They agreed to help and decided to head to the future to eliminate this threat. The kids were determined to go as well, especially present Trunks, although the mother's immediate reaction was to forbid them from going. By this point, it would have been pointless. Goten and Trunks were vastly stronger than Goku and Vegeta combined, so if it was dangerous for them, it would be even more so for Goku and Vegeta. By that logic, there was no option but to let the kids intervene as well. Beerus asked future Trunks for a detailed description of Goku Black and his attire, harboring suspicions about a possible link to a Supreme Kai from Universe 10. He went to visit Gowasu and his apprentice Zamasu to investigate further. Meanwhile, Bulma finished repairing and recharging the time machine, preparing it for the journey to the future. A day or two later, everything was ready. Goku, Vegeta, Goten, and both Trunks squeezed themselves into the time machine to travel back to the future and defeat that Goku Black imposter. Upon arriving, everyone was horrified by the devastation and desolation. Goten and Trunks felt particularly shaken by the apocalyptic scene, even more than Goku and Vegeta, because the hybrid Saiyans had a moral code closer to that of a justice-driven hero, much like Gohan had once tried to be as the Great Saiyaman. Future Trunks was overjoyed to reunite with future Mai, who had survived. He gave her a sensu beam by mouth so she could swallow it, which made present Trunks quite uncomfortable. While Goten couldn't help teasing him, the teasing quickly shifted to Goku when he admitted that he had no idea what a kiss was, causing Goten to feel very awkward and question how on earth his father could be unaware of something so basic, yet somehow managed to have him and Gohan. The very thought sent shivers down Goten's spine, and he tried to forget about that embarrassing moment as best he could. With everything settled, they set out to provoke Goku Black into appearing. The fake Goku was confused as to why Vegeta and the real Goku had brought children to the future, unaware of just how powerful these kids were since they hadn't fought in the Universe 6 tournament. Vegeta began fighting Black first as in the original story. Although Vegeta was indeed far stronger here than in the original timeline, the same held true for Goku, which in turn meant that Black, having stolen Goku's body, had likewise reached a correspondingly higher level. He adapted and adjusted to this new power scale because of his stolen Saiyan body's quick evolution and Zamazu's divine essence within it. The fight between him and Vegeta proceeded similarly to how it did originally, with Black essentially forcing himself to evolve by gaining further mastery over that body, achieving Super Saiyan Rose after being saved multiple times from fatal blows by Zamazu. Everyone then began to suspect that this Zamazu must be the Supreme Kai from Universe 10, whom Beerus had mentioned before they left for the future. Present Trunks flew into a rage when he saw his father impaled by Black's Keyblade. He immediately transformed into Super Saiyan Blue to fight him. Black was stunned to see these damned mortals were so corrupt and dangerous that even their children could wield the power of the gods. Goten joined his friend in battle, while future Trunks felt powerless, witnessing how far his past self had surpassed him. At least he and Goku could occupy Zamazu, who was far weaker compared to them. But the problem was his immortality. Meanwhile, to Black's horror, he was getting brutally beaten by Goten and Trunks, far more powerful than Vegeta or even Goku's body at its newly achieved Super Saiyan Rose level. The kids overwhelmed Black, while he adapted thanks to his superior combat experience and Goku's evolving body. Imbued with divine essence, his mortal body couldn't heal automatically and he needed Zamazu's help just to stay alive. But Zamazu was himself busy fending off Goku and future Trunks. Seeing that Black couldn't last much longer against such mighty kids, and in a desperate move, Zamazu switched the Potara earrings to his other ear, causing Black's body and his own to be drawn together and fuse. Thus, fused Zamazu, a superior, likewise immortal being, came into existence. Things looked truly dire, at least that's what everyone thought. In reality, though this fusion was indeed more powerful, the children still held a sizable advantage over fused Zamazu. Moreover, they too could fuse. They escaped and hid just long enough to perform the fusion dance, transforming into Gotenks, who immediately went Super Saiyan Blue. Goku warned Gotenks to be careful with his energy usage, pointing out that Zamazu was immortal. Even if they could overpower him, they might tire out before they could truly destroy him. But Gotenks replied that he had a plan to finish him off once and for all. Gotenks unleashed the full extent of his power without restraint, showing how much he'd matured these past years and learning from his mistakes against Majin Buu. His strategy was to inflict as much damage as possible on Zamazu before he could regenerate. Once he saw Zamazu's body was in an extremely horrific, gory state, he used a technique he had learned indirectly from Beerus: Hakai. Everyone was astonished to see Gotenks perform this move. He succeeded in partially erasing fused Zamazu, and slowly the entire body was consumed by that power. It seemed everything was over and Zamazu was defeated. What the children didn't know was that Hakai cannot completely destroy someone who is immortal. Fused Zamazu was only half immortal, so while his mortal half was erased by that attack, the immortal half survived and fully regenerated, causing a bizarre phenomenon. The restored Zamazu reverted to his normal state, no longer fused, because his other half had been erased. Only Zamazu remained intact thanks to his immortality. Zamazu was disconcerted and disoriented by what had just happened, yet relieved to still be alive and see that Hakai had not finished him off, at least not the immortal version of himself. Shortly afterward, due to the immense strain of using that technique, the two youths' fusion ended. Although they had given Vegeta a Senzu Bean so he could recover, the situation remained tense and complicated. Nobody had any idea how to finish off an immortal Zamazu, even if they vastly outclassed him in power. That didn't change the fact that they couldn't kill him. Future Trunks then stepped forward, telling everyone, including Zamazu, that they should return to the past to figure out a way to defeat him. In the meantime, Future Trunks would stay in his timeline to keep Zamazu busy so he wouldn't escape. Present Trunks decided to stay alongside his future self to help in the grueling task of fighting an immortal enemy for probably more than a full day. Without further ado, Goku, Vegeta, and Goten went back to the past and informed everyone of what had happened, confirming to Beerus and Whis who was responsible for the chaos. They then immediately headed to Universe 10 to deal with the present version of Zamasu. While that was taking place, and while Bulma recharged the time machine, Goku learned the Mafuba technique along with Goten, in order to seal Zamasu and bring him back to the present so Beerus and Whis could deal with him. Thanks to Goten's presence, Goku didn't mistake the Mafuba sealing charm for one of Master Roshi's risque coupons. Father and son, together with Vegeta, then returned to the future. They quickly reunited with the two Trunks, who had been fighting Zamasu for more than 24 hours. Although it had been easy at first, exhaustion and lack of sleep had made things extremely difficult. Both were utterly spent, and the others arrived just in time to relieve them. Goku without delay performed the Mafuba and successfully sealed Zamasu, finally ending that divine threat. They returned to the present and handed the sealed container over to Whis to deal with. Meanwhile, everyone else was free to celebrate their victory with a delicious meal, although the two Trunks mostly just wanted to sleep at first. A few days later, Trunks and Mai were ready to return to the future. The one Grand Zeno had not erased. Trunks felt sad going back to such a desolate place with so few humans remaining, uncertain what they could really do. Even so, future Trunks insisted on returning, confident that from the ashes of the past, they could build a better future, even if it would be difficult and take a very long time to recover from everything Zamasu and Black had destroyed. Thus the future and present said their farewells once again. Everyone wished future Trunks and Mai good luck, hoping there would be no more tragedies, and that Trunks could finally have the happy ending he deserved after all his suffering. Following the events of the Goku Black saga, life went on as usual on Earth, while fathers and sons continued their divine training on Beerus' planet. However, they did frequently return home to spend time with their families. By this point, Goten and Trunks had grown so much that they had basically reached their adult forms, similar to how they appeared at the end of Dragon Ball Z in the original story. With bodies now better suited to handle their immense power, they could push their limits even further. They both achieved Super Saiyan Blue evolution like their fathers. However, the enormous power gap between the veteran warriors and their sons kept growing wider. Even though Goku and Vegeta had attained Ultra Instinct and Ultra Ego respectively over the year following the Goku Black incident, just to keep up with their children, Goten and Trunks remained far beyond their parents' reach. The hybrid Saiyans, however, didn't seem ready to wield either of those advanced forms themselves, not because they lacked the power, but because they weren't yet mature or experienced enough to master such complex abilities. Trunks was too young and kind-hearted to embrace a purely destructive mindset required for Ultra Ego, and Goten was too inexperienced as a martial artist to fight on instinct alone, as Ultra Instinct demands. But in truth, it hardly mattered. Despite Goku and Vegeta's attainment of those divine powers, Goten and Trunks still outclassed them. Their fathers were immensely proud of how far the boys had come. By that point, although Beerus would never admit it openly, Goten and Trunks may have equaled, if not slightly surpassed him in power, even on his own. This explained why Beerus had recently begun training again, quite obviously concerned about the hybrid strength. If they were already close to this level separately, he knew perfectly well that if they fused, they could defeat him with ease. During that period, and with no second version of himself around for amusement, Grand Zeno summoned Goku to play with him, bored from being alone in his palace. That was when Goku got the idea to entertain him by suggesting the Tournament of Power, which Zeno thought was an excellent plan. When Goku returned to his universe, Beerus furiously berated him for setting this all in motion. Even Goten wasn't entirely convinced this was a good idea. And Vegeta, who was absent because his daughter was about to be born on Earth, would surely have also believed that Kakarot had acted stupidly for endangering everyone. This became all the more evident when the Grand Minister appeared before them to announce the tournament's conditions, namely that the losing universes would be erased. Everyone was petrified, further incensing Beerus and company at Goku's reckless proposal. Still, there was no choice but to prepare for the Tournament of Power and gather the necessary warriors. After the usual recruiting events, Universe 7's team was decided. Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, Piccolo, Android 17, Android 18, Krillin, Tien Shinhan, Goten, and Trunks. Once everyone was ready, they headed to the World of Void to begin the tournament on the platform created by the Grand Minister. As soon as it started, the team cohesion that Gohan wanted to maintain fell apart. Everyone went their own way, or at most paired up with their closest ally. For instance, Goku and Vegeta went off together, while Goten and Trunks stayed side by side, and Krillin went off with Android 18, while Android 17 fought solo. Fortunately, most of them were far stronger than in the original timeline. For example, Gohan had continued training thanks to the persistent pressure of Goten, Trunks, and Piccolo, giving him a power level comparable to what he had in the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie before awakening his beast form. Piccolo, similarly, was about as strong as he was in the same film prior to having his potential unlocked. But ultimately, none of that mattered much. Even without perfect teamwork, Universe 7 found itself systematically taking down the other universes with ease. Before long, Goten and Trunks realized that the only truly interesting fighters who could pose any real challenge to them or their fathers were from Universes 6 and 11. Multiple battles raged simultaneously among these three universes, which were the only ones left after the rest had been eliminated. But once again, the massive power advantage of Universe 7 became apparent, especially since they were still holding back considerably. With little choice, Jiren stepped in to aid the remaining members of Universe 11, Dispo and Topo, while Universe 6 was down to hit Caulifla, Kale, and Kaba. Caulifla and Kale, who had learned the Super Saiyan transformation thanks to Kaba, used the Potara earrings to fuse into Kefla, amassing enough power to hold off Universe 7's warriors for a time. However, in this version of events, Gohan was easily strong enough to defeat her without significant trouble. Meanwhile, Vegeta had an honorable confrontation with Kaba, once again pushing him to surpass his limits as a mentor would. But eventually, Vegeta had to move on in the tournament and knock Kaba out. Still, he promised that if Universe 7 won, they would use the Super Dragon Balls to resurrect the other universes. Kaba, deeply grateful for that kindness, trusted Vegeta's words and left the stage along with his fellow Saiyans, also defeated by Gohan. The last one standing from Universe 6 was Hit, who gave everything he had against a very relaxed Goku. Goku was able to predict all of Hit's attacks and time skips without breaking a sweat, even though Hit had grown much stronger since their last battle. Realizing that their fight wasn't going to be much of a challenge, Goku quickly ended it, apologizing to Hit for not having more fun in their match. Thus, Universe 6 was also defeated. Goku hurried because by then, Goten and Trunks had started fighting Jiren. The most interesting battle, and both Goku and Vegeta wanted badly to join in. Sadly for them, it looked like neither would be needed. Even separately and without using their full power, Goten and Trunks, only in Super Saiyan God, were pushing Jiren to his limits, leaving him completely unable to defend himself. To the two hybrids, it felt like an easy fight. Seeing their sons had it under control, and that they had arrived too late, Goku and Vegeta settled on rock, paper, scissors to decide who got to fight Toppo. Vegeta won, angering Toppo even more by taking the match so lightly. He immediately attacked Vegeta, only to realize that Universe 7's warriors had been so relaxed the entire time. Vegeta unleashed Ultra Ego, shocking all the gods of destruction, even Jiren, who realized they had all been holding back for the fun of it. Furious, Jiren tapped into more of his hidden power, but once again it hardly mattered against the young hybrids. With hardly any challenges left, Goku found himself pretty bored. Dispo was being overpowered by the androids and quickly tossed off the stage. Before long, only Toppo, Jiren remained to be defeated, while the rest of Universe 7 had nothing to do but watch and await their anticlimactic, inevitable victory. By that point, practically no one from Universe 7 had been eliminated, apart from Krillin and Tien Shinhan. Everyone else felt disappointed by how little of a challenge this tournament had turned out to be. Toppo tried to wield the powers of destruction in response to Vegeta's Ultra Ego, but his destructive form wasn't nearly as developed, and in the end, Vegeta beat him. Meanwhile, Goten and Trunks continued demolishing Jiren, who was running out of stamina and energy. Out of respect for Jiren as a warrior, or perhaps to teach him humility, the hybrids briefly revealed their full power to knock him off the stage, transforming into Super Saiyan Blue evolution. All the gods of destruction were left dumbfounded and horrified, gazing at Beerus in disbelief, as if asking whether these youngsters were really on their level. Uncomfortably, Beerus nodded, confirming it, leaving all the gods feeling vulnerable before mortal warriors they never imagined could exist. In a matter of seconds, it was over. Universe 7 emerged the winner of the Tournament of Power. They summoned Super Shenron, Zalama, and Goten and Trunks decided on the wish, asking for all the erased universes to be restored. Both Grand Zeno and the Grand Minister were pleased by this altruistic act, relieved to see such young, mighty mortals in the multiverse. Everyone celebrated the victory, congratulating Goten and Trunks on a job well done. Their parents once again expressed how proud they were, amazed at how far the two had come. In a way, Goten and Trunks were also grateful that they'd once been trapped in the hyperbolic time chamber so many years ago. Without that pivotal event changing their destinies, they might never have continued to train so hard or realize their true potential to become the great warriors they were now. Finally, everyone returned to Universe 7 to celebrate the win, and the fact that it boasted such formidable and powerful guardians against any threat that might arise in the future.